Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan. I'm the digital marketing manager at Academy of Mind, and today we're joined by Landon, who's one of our sales reps. Now, Landon regularly talks to customers looking for learning management systems. And the truth is, most customers looking for online training platforms really aren't sure where to begin in the buying process. And considering there are thousands of LMS providers on the market and even more alternative e-learning platforms, it's not surprising why there's so much confusion around this topic. That said, today we're going to make it easy for you by explaining how to properly research and buy the best learning management system for your company. So I'm going to stop talking though and let Landon just introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. It's great to chat with you. Yeah, my name is Landon, and as Jonathan said, I'm one of the sales reps here at Academy of Mind. And I've had a chance to experience learning management systems kind of at every step, both as a user, a little bit as an administrator, and now working here as a vendor at Academy of Mind. And so, yeah, really excited to talk a little bit about the buying process and again, what the purchasing journey looks like for a learning management system.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So yeah, let's just start at the top. If you were a company that's looking for an LMS, where would you start?
It's always difficult figuring out, the best starting point. And truthfully, this will change quite a bit based off of your team dynamic, as well as, your own background here as well. So, one of the things we hear quite a bit is that, a learning management system doesn't carry the same weight in every organization as maybe some other different types of software. For example, a CRM, every team's going to have maybe a CRM, and but again, your company may not be based around what goes on in that software. Whereas with a learning management system, you may have your entire company based around that particular product. And so being able to distinguish, what's the exact use case? Are we using this for internal training versus external training? But then also, if you're in charge of this project, thinking about your own personal experience, as somebody who has a background in instructional design and development, they may be a little bit more adept at looking at certain features or functionalities versus somebody who this may be their first experience with a learning management system. I think either way, though, it's important to create documentation around the exact features and functionalities that you're looking for. That way you can start to think about, the type of LMS that's going to best cater to what your needs are.
Awesome. Yeah, documentation is definitely extremely important. So, there's pretty much two audiences when it comes to purchasing LMS. There are companies that have experience using LMSs before, and then there's companies who are pretty much starting their e-learning program from scratch. So what would you say to those first-time buyers that are just now doing their research on what a learning management system is, and they've kind of made a decision that that's the type of software they need, but they don't have experience using one before?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And on that side, as a first-time buyer, again, setting up a process and going back to that documentation like we talked about is so important because that's really going to be your framework for the types of systems that would make the most sense. Again, if you were doing internal training versus external, you're going to need a platform that can cater to that specific type of training. And so, again, identifying particular features or functionalities from there is going to help guide your actual research. Because after that point, you can actually use sites like Capterra to see which systems start to actually meet some of that criteria on paper. And then you can begin kind of creating a short list rather than hopping on a call with 100 different LMS providers, right? Again, your time is important here too. So that little bit of legwork up front in your actual research can really help to start actually creating a list and narrowing it down a bit to maybe 10, 15 at the most platforms at this point that would make sense to sort of explore deeper.
Definitely. And so I think what I'm hearing is really honing in on the features that you need. For instance, if you're doing employee training, then think about the exact features and things you would need to be able to do in the system. Would you say also, like considering sort of the e-learning journey or how that platform is going to work and look? Is that something that's important while looking for an LMS?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, generally after you've created documentation and then began creating a sort of short list of platforms to explore, that's really where you would begin to actually start demoing some of these different products. So when you're in that process, again, of actually looking through, this is where you can kind of take your short list and compare it to some of your specific needs from there. And then hopefully start to narrowing that down a little bit. Of course, the type of training and your personal background and experience is going to have some impact on the specific things that you may want to look for during a demo of an LMS system. But again, once you have that sort of list, it's really easy to keep an eye out for the things that are important to you. Categorizing your features or functionalities off of must-haves versus nice-to-haves, or just maybe even things that you think would be really cool, can help guide some of that process as well too. That way, again, you're making sure that platform, as you're watching it and kind of seeing somebody else navigate it, like myself, that you can kind of get an idea on whether that's something that would be easy to use and would sort of meet your needs there.
Definitely. You talked about features that are sort of reflect, you sort of write which features you need based on the type of training you would be using your LMS for. How important is something, and of course, categorizing those features, or rather prioritizing them in terms of what's necessary versus, things that would be nice to have, or maybe that's cool, but it's kind of like a 3-year roadmap where we don't need it today. But looking past features, how important is something like having a budget, even if it's a ballpark budget for first-time LMS buyers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so budgeting in particular is something that, of course, is going to change from organization to organization, right? If you're looking for a system as an academic institution, you're likely going to secure the funding for something like this months or potentially even years in advance. And then you may have a strict number, and that's what you work with. Whereas if you're maybe like a smaller startup, you may have ideas on numbers, but again, it could be a loose range that you're thinking about, and then sort of building a business case around that. So I think that's important to think about during that process as well. Is understanding the different costs of the platforms, and again, we've already talked so much about the documentation, but it's really easy once you've created a list of your needs to, even then at that point, sending that to some of the LMS vendors and saying, hey, this is kind of what we're looking to do. Can you tell us, roughly what something like this would cost? This is, the number of users that we're thinking. These are the functionalities that we need. And then at that point, again, you can get an idea on, whether that would make sense from a cost perspective.
Awesome. And I think that's really good that you mentioned actually just reaching out to an LMS provider with some of the key features you would need. I think it can get really overwhelming with so many companies on the market and LMS websites, especially when these pricing pages there's customizable pricing and there's so many different options. I think some clients looking for an LMS forget that maybe an email or just hopping on a call can very quickly let you guys know if that LMS is even a solution you want to pursue further. So I love that advice. So let's say, first time buyer, they've done their research on features, they know what they need. They found a couple LMS companies, they've done some demos. Is it important to actually test the software yourself before making a purchase?
Yeah, it's a tricky question for sure, right? And everyone's answer is going to be a little bit different. But I would absolutely say that it's important to be able to test, just for the sake of, you're going to be the one that may be in there every day, or you have teammates who will be in there, constantly within the system. And so that's great that it looks good during a demo, but typically it's not sufficient to know for sure whether it's going to work. It's very easy for somebody who demos the product as a part of their job to make it look really easy and comfortable, but you want to make sure that you're comfortable with it as well too. And so I recommend, if you have the ability and you have the time as a part of this process, to actually go in and test some of these different platforms out yourself. Some companies will easily give you that access. I know here with Academy of Mind, it's generally a part of our process is making sure that you actually test it for yourself and see if it's something that you can envision you or your team using. But again, I highly recommend at least asking as a part of that process, because it's really hard to see it and not have a hands-on experience and knowing, whether it's going to actually work or not.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, and it's also important to consider, a software demo is usually something like 30 minutes. Like you said, it's prepared by the vendor, and this is not anything to, you know, say demos are demos are great. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's a little different if you have 14 days or 28 days for you or multiple team members to really go in the software, start creating content, start, messing with the settings and really testing the functionality. I think another interesting point worth talking about is, there's certain things while you're documenting your features, your requirements during this whole process that it's pretty easy to glance over and you might not be thinking about until you actually try the software yourself. And you realize, maybe there's some user experience that's really just not going to work great for your company. And I think, beyond the demo, that's really where the actual trial is so important. How do you decide which platform is the best if you've done multiple demos and it's just a close call? You like certain things on each platform, but you're really not sure. What would you tell those customers on how to make the best decision?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to the framework here. And, hopefully at this point you've thought, quite a bit about the specific functionalities or specific features that you're looking for. That again, they must have, you have to have them as a part of your process, and then incorporating that as you're actually testing. So, thinking about, first of all, which platforms meet everything that we need to have, that will be ready to go from day one. And then it can come down to a little bit to those subcategories of things that are nice to have, or maybe just really would like to see out of a platform that would be really, again, just an overall nice to have feature. So again, those types of functionalities, those could be the things that maybe sway you over. Of course, the ease of use is something that should be taken in, as a part of this as well too. Two platforms may have virtually the same features, but one could just be that little bit easier for you to navigate. But then, of course, too, you might have two platforms that are virtually the same as far as you've seen from like a testing standpoint, but one may be half of the cost. And then that could, of course,
That's true.
An impact on the decision as well, too. So there's a few different things. I would say that the general things to look out for is, again, if it's really close, go back to those nice to have features. Think about the ease of use, and then also, again, looking at the costs across the board, because again, if two are really close, but price is the differentiator, I mean, that could be, what ultimately leads to the decision.
It's true. And I want to touch on ease of use and user experience a little, because that's definitely something really important. And if you think about it, online learning, online training, whoever really is the client you're training, whether it's employee training, whether it's training other organizations, whether it's accredited, really regardless of however you look at the training, it's really important. User experience is extremely important for online learning, especially when we're talking about, self-paced courses that the individual is going to be going through on their own time. You want to make sure the courses and the dashboard, everything's pretty easy to understand. It's quick to get going. So, user experience is definitely important. And I think that's one of those things that, unlike seeing if a platform has a feature and checking that box, user experience isn't really something that you can, for better or for worse words, experience unless you're actually testing the platform. How important is considering essentially the size of your training program and how many users will be actively taking that? Because you and me both know that active users is definitely a big part of how LMS platforms are priced out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a little different depending on the use case. So if I'm doing an internal training session for my team, it's pretty easy to generally guess, how many users I may have within the system, which again, so much of a pricing structure for a learning management system may be based around just number of users. But especially on the case of external training, or if you're doing like B2B client training, it could be really difficult to guess exactly how many users are going to be within a platform. And so, it's some systems may do pricing around individual users, and they may charge like a platform fee, and then it could be like $4 or $6 per user on top of that. And so, we understand at Academy of Mind how challenging that is to have a model like that, and you want to make sure that it's a platform that can scale with you. And so, yeah, we generally look at active users who's actually logging into the system within a 30-day period, because truthfully, there's a lot of your learners, they may take one or two courses, they may complete the training, and then they may not log in ever again or for a long period of time. And so that's something to take into account as well too. And so yeah, that's something that we look at as a part of our pricing structure, because again, it doesn't really make sense without individual users. It's really important to think about who's active within a given 30-day period, and then thinking about that from a pricing perspective.
Definitely. And I love that at the end you even tied that back to pricing, because active users and that almost is just it really will just affect your pricing. So it comes back to budget too. And another thing, you use words like scalability and flexibility. I think that's really important too, because let's say you're a company whose sole business is training, right? It's selling courses, and that's your full bottom line. In that situation, the decision to buy an LMS could be because you want to scale, you want to 5x, you want to 10x the business very quickly. And with that being said, if you choose an LMS that really limits you based on the amount of users, you may start at a plan that's like 10,000 a year, but in a year, when the contract renews, you could be paying, 6 figures. So that's definitely, and every LMS provider is different, but I just think that is, maybe it's not as important for, first time buyers, especially if it's just an internal training, but it definitely is something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. And so, yeah, it's, again, taking a look at how you envision your user base scaling. Again, it's something that you definitely want to think about as you look at some of the different platforms out there.
Yep, all great stuff. So we've talked a lot about first-time buyers. Let's say you have used an LMS provider before. It doesn't matter. Maybe you've used a couple. Maybe you just had a contract, your first contract after a couple years. But speaking to the audience that does have some experience using a learning management system, what type of advice can you give those folks that are looking to switch providers and get something better, whether that's because they outgrew their old solution, it was missing features, or whatever the scenario?
Yeah, very few people I have ever talked to who have a learning management system and are now looking for a new one have said, we are here on this call because we really love our current setup and want to keep everything the exact same. So the important thing to think about is, why are we considering moving away from this platform in the first place? Is it a budget related thing? Are we overpaying for how we are using this solution or how this fits into our business model? Is it a particular functionality that we either are lacking, or it's just not quite, what you envisioned it would be? Or is it things around the support that you're receiving, or the ability to customize and actually flex the platform a little bit? And if those are the reasons why, again, that's important to take into account, because it, as challenging as it can be to have to migrate everything over to a new system, one, you want to again identify those reasons, but also thinking about, well, is there going to be support for that process as well too, of the actual migration of the data? And so again, that's something we've thought about within our team here quite a bit. So that's, again, it's a big challenge moving everything over. And so Yeah, we've got quite a bit on how to actually assist with that process. And that's why we offer that service on the migration side, because it can be so time consuming for a particular team.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, migrating a platform is no easy task, especially when you have, active users and you don't want to mess anyone up, and you have, hundreds of gigabytes of courses and Scrum courses. So all really, really great stuff for sure. It sounds also like when you're switching from an LMS provider, one of the most important things is pretty much to document what wasn't working at your current provider, and essentially asking these companies, do you have these features? Can you do this? And really addressing those problem points you had with your previous vendor.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
Cool. I do want to touch on customization and customer support. Obviously, customer support is something that exists in every LMS company, but not every vendor is going to give you the same quality of customer support. So just speaking to that, how important is, partnering with an LMS provider that is really known for having outstanding customer support?
Yeah, of course. The inevitable truth is that with technology, things may go wrong and things may break at times. It's as much as we would love to say that everything will always work perfectly. I think it's true with any platform you use at any point that there may be periods where something is either challenging or again may just not function correctly. So having a team that can actually support not only when things go wrong, but also just when something is confusing, or if something that you are trying to accomplish, you're having a hard time doing by yourself. And so, the support side is also something you can test out, if you have the ability to try the platform, which we talked about earlier. So it's something to keep in mind too, is to understand what the support process looks like when you would become a customer of that platform, and understanding what that process looks like, what the response times are. And then on the customization side, again, as you think about your training process, your needs may change over time.
Yeah.
And so you want to have a platform, of course, that can still keep the core things that you really like about it, and still keep, again, the main, sort of framework around it, but then also having the ability to expand and add new things on top as your needs might change.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think it's interesting you brought up, that trial period as well, and sort of it's almost like a lot of companies will give you a sneak peek of the level of their support during that trial period. Maybe you have some questions while you're trialing the software, and you send support questions, and they're just giving you solutions, and they're giving you solutions quickly. So I think it also goes back to the original documentation, whether you're a first-time buyer or switching from platforms. Think about your team size and your resources and sort of your working styles. Are you a company, or are you a team that needs more support? Or are you pretty, technical, and you're able to kind of just scroll through documentation and do a lot of stuff on your own? Would you say that's something as well to consider, like your team sizes and your resources while looking for an LMS?
Yeah, of course. And, it's nice to be able to say that, I'm a part of a team that really caters to both sides of that spectrum, where, there are open source solutions out there for somebody who, may be extremely technical and know how to build something, know exactly what they want to build and how to build it. And then there are platforms who they may be a great product, but there's not a lot of room for expansion or customization. And so I like to think we hit that sweet spot extremely well, where we can build upon the product that we offer, but out of the box, there's already so much that you can accomplish and do that,
Right.
Again, we don't need to change the foundation itself. It's just being able to actually expand upon it and be able to make some small tweaks or changes to actually fit the needs of the teams that we're working with. So yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, it's something to think about, and it's nice knowing that we have the ability to cater sort of to both sides.
Definitely. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of those reasons, user friendliness, customer support, flexibility, and the option to build upon the proprietary platform, those are all reasons, a lot of our customers just really stick with us for so long and love us. I guess just a little more on customization, and almost something I want to say too, because I think this could help clients out there. There's a lot of platforms where you may be able to do some tweaks in the software, going in the settings, but I think something also worth considering is what level of customization do you need? And is your training program, do you have a lot of complex needs, right? Are you a continuing education provider where you're having to abide by state regulations and laws, and you have to make some funny tweaks that maybe not a lot of providers will give you the option to? So I think that's something worth considering. Would you say that that's something that customers should think about as well in terms of, do we need these complex things versus, we can kind of just consider most LMS platforms and they're gonna fit our needs out of the box?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the scalability aspect of this. So it's nice to know that a platform can scale with you and grow with you as your team grows and maybe your particular needs may change. So again, it's not always just thinking about the now. It's, what is this going to look like? What is this program going to look like 3 years from now, or 5 years, or even 10 years from now? And are we going to have to move everything over to a new system, or are we going to be able to expand upon the core foundations of what we've already built here, which will save us money and it will make everything easier in the long run? So yeah, it's definitely worth considering. And I like to use the word future proof a lot too with your setup, is that again, it can be quite a setback to end up on the wrong platform and then have to move everything later on. So again, there's certainly some pressure when that decision actually gets made.
Definitely. Last thing before we wrap this up, you're constantly talking to customers looking for a learning management system. What is one thing you constantly hear from customers that could help them if they knew, like they did their research beforehand or just knew this?
Yeah, I think one of the common things that I hear a lot, especially on the initial call that I may have with a client, is, well, we know that we want to accomplish Z, but we're pretty unsure about W, X, and Y up to the actual steps leading up. And so, going back again to just the documentation of the framework around your actual program is that it's very easy to get overwhelmed with all of the solutions, and then you find yourself caught up on, oh, well, does this platform offer AI compatibility?
Right.
And you start you start getting into the weeds, and without having your framework going in, you wouldn't run a marathon without training for it, right? You wouldn't try to attempt that without having some sort of preparation, and the process for something like this is really not all of that different. And again, it's not a sprint. It's actually something that, again, you need to think about how you want this to look in 6 months, how you want this to look 3 years from now, and then again, hopefully deciding on the right platform based off of that.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, window shopping with LMSs and getting stuck in the weeds is never smart. And I think just going back to literally where we started this conversation, what is your training and what features do you need to accomplish that training in the best way for your organization to essentially reach your goal, whatever that goal may be. And because I think if you miss that step, those are the customers that sometimes can get caught up just, hundreds of LMS calls, and then they still feel like they don't have a solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, it's been a great conversation, Landon. I really appreciate you joining me for this. Is there anything else you wanted to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I would just say, if you're in the market for a learning management system that is flexible, it's customizable, and can cater to a wide variety of training, definitely give Academy of Mind a look.
Awesome. I love it. And for those of you guys watching this on YouTube, make sure to go ahead and click the subscribe button. That really helps us. And thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.